kick to Julius. Puts up a three. And a goal!
Time for Bearcat Blitz. Glad to have you all in to start the week here on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer. As things are dying down in terms of big news and big things happening on the basketball and football side of things for Cincinnati Athletics. We'll get to the latest news and all that in just a few moments as I get ready to welcome on my co-host, Neil Meyer. We are presented by Bet Online, of course, and you can catch the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Google, all the great podcast mediums. You can find us there. Get us on Bet Online as well. Check out Bet Online there also. And make sure to check us out on YouTube, Talking Cats with Russ Heltman. Check out the YouTube page there. And we'll be back on Bally Sports Ohio this fall. Welcome in, Neil, after a message from Bet Online. It's your number one source for your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups and player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. We got some good topics today, including the basketball transfer portal. Sean Stewart not picking the Bearcats. He's headed just up north on the highway to Ohio State. They have just cleaned up with their transfer portal haul so far this year. No new portal contact this week until right before the episode, when we had some interesting transfer portal contact from Cincinnati, a player that they faced last year, I'm pretty sure. So we're going to touch on that in the first segment, and then we will get into some kind of New Heights Live look at it. YouTube show just released. Bearcats fans able to check that out now, and they're able to kind of see what the top moments were from the night. We'll get into that. And also we'll touch on the basketball rotation a little bit as well. How deep is this rotation going to be? Is it deep enough already to fully compete in the Big 12? We'll find out about all that after these messages on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, Sean Stewart is a Buckeye. He chooses the Ohio State Buckeyes over Cincinnati and Georgetown. Bearcats don't get the forward that they were coveting so dearly in the transfer portal. And now they're back to square one. How will they fill this final roster spot, final scholarship spot, I should say, is a mystery. Still have guys like Miles Kelly out there, Cedric Coward, Langdon Hatton, Chaz Lanier, and Atiki, Ali Atiki, center from BYU, who they obviously played in the Big 12 last season. He has, according to Truly Donovan, been connected to the Bearcats as well, as the transfer portal continues on here in the month of May. Portal completely closed, so they know what options they have at their disposal. Just about filling that final spot with Sean Stewart not picking the Bearcats.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And I know that was something we talked about on the last show, was Sean Stewart and what could potentially happen there. But ultimately, he goes to right up north to Columbus there and joins Jake Diebler in the Ohio State Buckeyes. But man, Russ, Jake Diebler's cooking in the transfer portal right now in year one. So, I mean, he lands his big-time target in Sean Stewart. But overall, it leaves one open spot for Wes Miller and the Bearcats here. Still one open scholarship as we sit here on May 7th. Obviously, still a little bit of time as the transfer portal is closed. There's still a lot of great players out there and a lot of big, interesting names. It's going to be interesting to see how they really address this final roster spot, whether that's another big forward or you go another big man, a wing player. You could go a couple different options, as we talked about all off season here. But overall, Russ, it's going to be interesting, right? See what kind of plays out. But there's a lot of names to keep an eye on, and BYU's Ali Tiki Ali is a big one to keep an eye on. Obviously, they're familiar with him. He's played in the Big 12. It's a lot of experience there. it's going to be something that's going to be really interesting as we see maybe how this all cooks up. According to Trilly Donovan, that Cincinnati is connected to him. It's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out.
23 games played last season, 62.1% field goal percentage. Going to fit right in with the Bearcats with a 45.8% free throw mark. That's Clifton Ball right there. 45.8% from free throw line. That's exactly how this program's been cooking from that mark over this entire century. 2.9 rebounds, did play just 11 minutes per game. So per 36, those numbers are looking very, very strong. And you take 62.1% field goal percentage any day of the week. Comes in as a junior. Looks like he has, just one season of eligibility remaining after 3 years at BYU. So an interesting name right there. We've already touched on Chaz Lanier. We've already touched on Langdon Hatton. We've already touched on Cedric Coward, Miles Kelly, Seydou Traore out of Manhattan as well. We've already touched on all those guys. Seems like maybe one of those 6 is going to be the final taker of this scholarship spot. And I think, Neil, we were debating last week, and we can get into the depth right now of the roster as we transition here. I'm more and more thinking like you kind of have to fill this spot with a big. You kind of have to do it with the physicality of the Big 12, just with how much banging there is night to night in the paint out there in this league, and adding two more games to the league schedule at that. I think you need to address this spot with size, and it would be nice if they could address this spot with size in a player that has more than 1 year of eligibility left. The only of those 6 that fits that mark, Neil, is Seydou Traore. Everybody else has just 1 season of eligibility remaining, especially those centers that I mentioned in Tiki and Langdon Hatton. So that's not the most ideal thing right there. But at this point, I think it's just, we're not worried about addressing the future with what's left in the transfer portal and missing out on Sean Stewart. We're worried about addressing getting to the NCAA tournament for the first time this decade. That has to be priority 1, not planning for the future at this point in the transfer portal timeline. Getting the best 1-year talent is probably going to be, I think, the most discreet and the most direct option to most improve the program status, not only just this year, but moving forward, because you got to break through. This is the year to break through. Year 4 for Wes Miller. He injected lighter fluid into his tenure at UNC Greensboro in year 4. You expect the same here, and some extra lighter fluid can come by way of a 1-year transfer, as opposed to them maybe taking a less talented guy on the surface, a less experienced guy, but molding him for future teams and future kind of depth charts.
Yeah, Russ, and I agree right with you. I mean, obviously, it was all hands on deck for Sean Stewart as UC was going as hard as they could to potentially land the former 5-star. But overall, I've been saying it for a while, too. Outside of Sean Stewart, I think they definitely need to add size to the front court. I mean, you look at the roster right now, Russ, Aziz Bandejo is the only forward center on this roster right now. And then you're looking at everybody else. I mean, there's a lot of guards returning. You got a lot of talent there in the front court. Day Thomas, Jizzle James, Rayvon Griffith, Connor Hickman coming in.
Backcourt, you mean? You talking about the guards?
Yeah, there's a lot of talent with the guards, but in the front court, in the Big 12, teams like to bang inside. And they're physical. They can go at you. Aziz Bandejo provides unlimited defensive specialist. He's a great elite rim protector, a great defender. But overall, you got to have depth there in the front court, and that's what a lot of teams have been able to do, especially in the Big 12, but NCAA tournament teams. You look at where their depth is, they have depth there in the front court, but also at that guard position. And right now, the guard position, you have a lot of great depth there. Jizzle James, Day Thomas, Rayvon Griffith, Connor Hickman coming in from Bradley, Simas Lukosius, Dan Skillings even. But you're looking down right now, Russ. I think it's key that they have to find another big man in the portal, and I agree with your statement. I think right now for them and Wes Miller and this staff, it's best to go after just somebody to get you to the NCAA tournament. If that means you have 1 year of eligibility left, I'm right there with you. I think right now that's probably the best option, is just to get to the breakthrough, try to get to the NCAA tournament for the first time this decade. But right now, if that was me, Russ, I'd be targeting somebody who has unlimited experience, played great experience over the last few seasons, a big guy for the front court. I think they just desperately need some front court depth, and I think that would be the the key for the last final roster spot this offseason.
Three front court players on the roster right now. You got 4 wings in Lukosius, Reed, Skillings, and Betsy. You got 5 guards in Hickman, Frederick, Griffith, and Day Thomas and Jizzle James. And then Tyler McKinley is your only power forward on the roster right now. Arrington Page, Aziz Mandego, your only centers. So some more depth at the 4 would be ideal. Tiki, not necessarily going to give you that. He's more of a true center at 6'10", 220 pounds. Can give you a little bit of mixing in at the 4 spot, but he's not necessarily going to be stretching the floor, so to speak, from outside as the 4 spot. He's attempted, I think, less than 5 career 3-point attempts, and it's not because he's not supposed to be. He's not because he's supposed to be getting them up and he's not supposed to be doing it or something like that. He's I think he's been restricted from shooting outside at all in his entire career. So interesting stuff from the Bearcat side of things. This is a deep, deep team right now, especially as Neil mentioned at the first 3 spots on a starting lineup. Just need to figure out that final big man piece. And it feels like with the way the roster is tilted so heavily towards the backcourt, that kind of debate we were having last week just for fun really seems like it needs to be leaning towards big man season. Take a quick break. We'll get to the football side of things and some of our top moments from New Heights Live, which is now out on YouTube for all Bearcats fans to see. Interviews with Joe Burrow, Orlando Brown Jr., and Desmond Ridder, among the Kelsey brothers' fun from the evening. All that and more on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, New Heights out on YouTube. We'll get to that in just a second, but some minor football news and notes to get to here. I saw yesterday that PFF had Luke Kandra as the second highest graded returning lineman. I don't know if it was all of college football. It had to be at least the Big 12. So that's great to see. And Kandra, Neil, I think we were talking about Dante Corleone being a top 3-round prospect last week. Kandra, in my eyes, is
right there with
early day 3, maybe late day 2 prospect, sneaking into the 3rd round potentially if he continues to elevate his game and show the heights he was able to hit last year. Interesting year for Kandra. I think he could definitely I think it's very likely he will be joining Dante Corleone as part of the Bearcats draft class, a multiple player draft class as opposed to just one in Jerwan Briggs in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Russ, you look at what Luke Kandra was able to do last season in his first season in Clifton. This is a guy who spent a lot of time with Coach Satterfield. He understands the scheme very well and what they're trying to do. But Russ, this is a guy who's just an absolute massive guy right up there in the trenches on the offensive line. And to get a guy like him returning, it's huge. And to see him get, I believe it was like an 82.1 grade, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was in the low 80s somewhere. Yeah.
But still a fantastic piece for Scott Satterfield and the Bearcats on the football front. Especially anytime you return the whole offensive line, that's something we've talked about throughout the offseason as well for the football side of things, Russ. But heading into a senior season for Luke Kandra, I think it's safe to say that this offseason has been very big for him based off how spring ball went. But the sky's the limit for Luke Kandra, and I definitely think right there, Russ, as you mentioned, he'll definitely hear his name called alongside Dante Corleone and maybe a couple others in this members of the 2025 NFL draft class. But he's going to be as big as a staple of this team than Dante Corleone, Brendan Sorsby, because what Luke Kandra provides is the leadership role, the offensive line, what he does off the court, off the field for this team. It says a lot about his character. And Russ, every time we've had an interaction with Luke Kandra, it's been nothing but fantastic. He's a great young man, a great leader. You see it every day.
Neil, from the Bearcat side of things, in terms of guys outgoing transfers, we had Tyler Gillison head to Michigan State. Looks like you noted that he is going to be playing edge there and was lining up at linebacker for much of this spring. So it could have been a positional difference issue with the coaching staff there. And then also Derek Shepard found a home for him to continue his playing career at University of Alabama, Birmingham, with Trent Dilfer. Old Dilfer Dimes down there going over to UAB. Just some guys finding new homes from the Bearcats. And interestingly, only 2 additions so far for Cincinnati out of the spring transfer portal. None really impactful this season in terms of a backup tight ends, really a fringe tight end at that, and the punter of the future in Max Fletcher, who, as we just debated and discussed, I think he could be the starting punter and the team would be better this year if they actually did a true competition and he were able to beat out Mason Fletcher. But they're likely just going to let Mason finish up his last season of eligibility. Max takes the red shirt, and then he has 2 years of UC punting left at his disposal and continue the Fletcher dynasty, so to speak, there. But a little quiet from the Bearcat side of things on the transfer portal, and we have had 2 commitments from outgoing players.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note, too, Russ, that the Tyler Gillison commitment to Michigan State, to see the graphics saying he was playing edge, I thought the move to linebacker was an interesting move, to say the least, this offseason, especially throughout spring ball. I mean, he was listed as a linebacker, but he played edge last season. Saw significant snaps across, I believe it was 10 or 11 games last season. But overall, I mean, 6'3", 230 pounds. So I was kind of hoping to see him there at the linebacker position this spring. Obviously, he got kind of hampered with a minor, I believe it was an ankle injury late in spring. So we didn't get to see much of him there at that linebacker position. But overall, I think Michigan State's a great home for him, Russ. I really do. And I mean, we saw what the production he was able to do when he had the reps last season. I thought he was going to be a key player for the Bearcats heading into this season before the new additions in the transfer portal of a guy like Michael Coleman, a couple other guys there on the defensive line. But overall, I think that's a great landing spot for a guy like Tyler Gillison. And then Derek Shepard to go down to UAB, and that was announced just moments prior to us filming this show, according to his social media. I think that's an interesting spot for him too. And I mean, get to play alongside Trent Dilfer, under Trent Dilfer. I mean, it's an interesting spot for Derek Shepard, to say the least. So glad those 2 found new homes.
Tyler Gillison, 124 snaps, nothing to sneeze at last year for the Bearcats defense, and did end up with a 63.4 overall grade defensively, which was better than a lot of Bearcats on defense last season, than what was the worst defense, I mean, arguably in the last 30 years from this outfit. Definitely in the last 25. One of the worst showings you could see from a UC defense. Closing out the show here, Neil. New Heights Live comes out on YouTube. I finally was able to post my my Joe Burrow loving the Jason Kelce call story. That's what stood out to me most from the interview portion of the New Heights Live. Just the fact that Burrow was just so open and honest and forthcoming about his just appreciation for what Jason and Travis less so, obviously, specifically Jason, and his just texting and reaching out to him throughout the period of time between him going from Ohio State to LSU. So it was just cool to see. And it's just another example of, you never know when going that extra mile or reaching out with that extra note can really impact someone. You never really know until down the line when they kind of voice that to you, if you're ever lucky enough to get that opportunity. So that was cool to see. And that was the biggest takeaway for me, was just the awesome through lines and connections dating back almost 10 years now to when Burrow was trying to look for a new home. What about you, Neil? What stood out most from the video release of New Heights Live?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest story to me, Russ, that really stood out was Desmond Ridder talking about where he was when he got the offer from Tommy Tupperville. Said he was at Churchill Downs in Lexington, and he was currently in a porta potty when Tommy Tupperville called and offered him a scholarship to the University of Cincinnati. So that was pretty interesting to hear. And I mean, you look at what happened shortly after that conversation there on that phone call that he answered in a porta potty. Goes to a college football playoff, goes on to now be in the NFL, have a historic college career, 3rd most wins in all time in college football. I think he only lost 2 games as a starter. So overall, I mean, it was a fantastic story from Des. But overall, I think just the interaction of everybody on campus that night was something that really stood out to me from the New Heights Live show. I mean, everybody was excited. I mean, Joe Burrow was in town, Orlando Brown, Travis, Jason, everything about that night. Like, there was people, Russ, camped out at like 12 o'clock, just talking ball, like getting people together. And that's what these kind of moments are all about when you get alumni on campus, right? So just to see and kind of feel the environment around campus It was freaking fantastic, in my opinion. Like, I mean, heck, Joe Burrow, Jason Travis hung out at Uncle Woody's the night before. Get them out there. You have a lot of good things to take away from the show, but we also, another good takeaway from the show, the Skyline Chili fight, Russ.
We touched on that a couple weeks ago. That was fun.
Yeah, that was pretty. You can't forget the Skyline Chili fight. Jason loses his Super Bowl ring. There's a lot to take away from that show, man. There really is.
Was a fun evening. We'll see if they can do it again in the future. We'll be doing another show again, that's for sure. Later in the week, catch us on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online, wherever you get your podcasts. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman, signing off.
3 minutes is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three.